Muslims have made lots of attempts to ensure only one Quran. There's been only one Quran. So we saw in 650 thereabouts, Uthman ordered all the variants to be burned. And in 1924, when the Egyptian government decided that the Hafs version was the version, so hence the 1924 Cairo version, they actually dropped all the variants in the Nile. So they want to get rid of these. They don't want people to know about them.
I want the truth! You can't handle the truth!
Ready to go. All right. Okay. So this is the whole question of the qira'ats, these readings of the Quran that are around. The common Muslim conception is that there is only one Quran. Here's a quote from Fatullah Gulen, the head of the Gulen Society. He says the Quran is entirely reliable. It's not been tampered, altered, edited or tampered with since it was revealed. All Muslims know only one Quran, perfectly preserved in its original words. Yusuf Ali, he was the translator of the most popular version of the English Quran that's been around for a long time, since the 1930s. He says, so well has the Quran been preserved both in memory and in writing that the Arabic text we have today is identical to the text as it was revealed to the Prophet. Not even a single letter has yielded to corruption over the passage of the centuries. And Al-Hajjaji Jallah, who was a barrister from, I think is probably, printed in Lahore, but he sounds like he's African. He says the Quran is fully preserved and not a jot or tittle has been changed or left out. He said, taking over the words of Jesus in that. But the Quran that we have today was not written by Muhammad. A couple of reasons for that. First of all, Muhammad was illiterate. He couldn't write anyway. And also the Quran could not be completed until he breathed his last breath. And if you know the story of Muhammad, actually when he was on his deathbed, at one time he called for a pen and paper to be brought. And he may have had a revelation that he'd received and he wanted to write down. So right until the very last moment of Muhammad's life, the Quran could not be completed. And so consequently, Muhammad never saw it. And so he couldn't confirm that the Quran that was written after his life was the actual Quran. And he wouldn't have been able to read it anyway. Someone would have had to read it to him. But after he died, various versions were compiled. So under Abu Bakr, the first caliph, there was a version which was put together by Zayd bin Thabit and kept by Hafsa, one of Muhammad's wives. Under Uthman, he got a committee of 4 to put it together and destroyed all the other versions. But there were other versions that were around at that time. And you can see the map on the left-hand side. You can see at different times as Islam expanded out, different versions of the Quran were in circulation. So down in the bottom bottom corner, you can see Zayd bin Thabit had his version with 114 chapters. Up in the top here, Abdullah ibn Masud, Muhammad said, if you want to learn the Quran, learn from this man. He was one of 4 men. His version had only 111 chapters. He left out the first one and the last 2, saying these were prayers of Muhammad. These were not the words of Allah. Abu Musa al-Ashri in Basra added 2 extra chapters. They were called al-Hafth and al-Qala. And he said these should also be in the Quran. And then over here, Ubay bin Ka'b, who we'll meet later, combined a couple of chapters together and got 115 chapters. So right from the earliest days, the Quran was a contested book. People had different understandings about what should be in the Quran. As time went by...
Let me just jump in here real quickly. If you go back to that, where do you get this material from? This is from the Islamic traditions, am I correct?
Exactly, yes. So all of it's from the Hadith or from the early writers. So Tabari, for example, and other writings that have been around since then.
So these are well known. These Muslims should know about Ubay ibn Ka'b and Abdullah ibn Masud and Abu Musa al-Ashari. These are household names, really, for most Muslims who are listening. Maybe new for many of the people who are not Muslim, but for any Muslims, these should be well known. And the fact that there were different chapters in every one of them suggests right away that you've got a narrative that is incorrect, that's going around the world today.
Yes, and there was never this agreement. In fact, the reason that Uthman put his recension together was because of this dispute. It happened up on the border of Armenia, and they went into a mosque, and the people, they'd set up a mosque, and some were reading from Abdullah ibn Masud's version, some were reading from Abu Musa's version, and they started yelling at each other because they disagreed. And that was when Hudhayfa went down to the Caliph Uthman and said, you need to give us just one Quran, we need to sort this out. So that was where the impetus for that single Uthmanic recension came from.
There you go. Okay.
But it's interesting, it wasn't that simple, because over time more versions were written. And this is the you can see here, it starts off with Muhammad, it moves to the people that he recited to, and he said, you know, when you learn the Quran, learn from these people. So these were his companions. They then passed it on to other people who passed it on to others, and this generation here is called the qira'at, which means the recitations, and they then pass it on to other people who are the riwayat. Now, the Qurans that we have today are all from these riwayat. We don't have, we do have some of the qira'at. I've got some of them here in my collection, but we don't know what came before that. We've only got the versions, and so this is 100 years after Muhammad died. We get the first written versions.
Okay, so what we're looking at on the right, these are the 7 plus the 3. Am I correct?
Yes, yes.
So there should be 10 there.
They're in green, and the 3 are in red. But there's actually another 4. So this guy, I've got one by El Amash. The ones that are in grey, for example, are the ones which I actually have physical copies of. So I've got those, and I'm just about to get this one, Ibn Amr and Ibn Amru. I should get those very soon. And I've got El Qasai as well.
Okay, I'm missing one red one there. There should be one more red one. I don't see him.
Okay.
Abu Jafar, Yaqub, and Khalaf. I have Yaqub there. I can see.
Khalaf there. He is here. That's the third one. See down here. Can you see my mouse? Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I see him now.
Yeah. And then from him came a couple of others. Now, you would think that if there was only one Quran, then all of these versions should be identical, but in fact they're not. And so in my collection here, which Jay showed you before, every single one of them has differences from the other. There's no 2 that are the same, which is a problem for how the Quran has been conveyed through this process. Okay. Let's be clear what we're not talking about. We're not talking about English translations of the Quran. There's over 106 of those. This list is a couple of years old, and that's not our topic today. We're only talking about Arabic versions of the Quran. The English translations are immaterial for this discussion. If you want to get these, by the way, you can go online and you can order some today. They come reasonably quickly. I ordered a few and they came within a few days, and they're only like $12 each or something like that. And you can get the whole collection. This one's from Jordan. I've actually been to this store in Jordan. And there they have 24 different versions of the Quran in Arabic. Or you can, there's the names, you can see them there. Or you can go to this one in Lebanon, again, the Easy Quran store, and you can order online. So you can get these through pay by PayPal or Visa, and they'll be at your place very soon. Yeah, they've got 13 versions of the Quran.
So, Bernie, they're not trying to hide this. This is right out in the open. Most Muslims in the Arab-speaking world are not troubled by what you're saying here if they're willing to ship them to you. Yeah, simple order, $12 a piece.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but usually this is seen as just as the area for scholars. Most people wouldn't, they don't know about them, and they certainly wouldn't be interested in it. They're a little bit nervous about this whole thing.
Okay, all right. So remember, I don't know, you remember that interview that we saw with Yasser Qadhi when he put his hand up there and he says, we have a respect for the Quran. We have a red line. beyond which we don't go. So that's what you're talking about. This is the red line. They don't really want you to go beyond that. They don't want you to ask the questions that he got asked when he was at Yale University 25 years ago. That red line that didn't exist at Yale, and now he had a crisis of faith. So it's interesting that they're willing to sell to you these without and themselves asking the very question that should be asked: why are we talking about now 10 different qira'ats, 10 different Qurans by now we're talking about the 8th and 9th century. So we're talking from 736 all the way up till 805. Or no, 844 actually is the latest of these 10.
That's right. Yes. Yeah. The last one. Oops. I'll come back to that. Let's just look at the one from the chain of transmission. So, like with the Hadith studies, I'll always talk about the isnad, which is the chain of transmission. The Quran actually has every version of the Quran has its own isnad, and again, they're different. So this is the one for the Hafs version. This is the most common one. And when Dr. Shabir Ali started his talk, he said, we talk about the 1924 Cairo edition. That is the Hafs version. So it's one of those 20 or there would be how many in that final thing? Probably about 20. That final generation. It's only one of them. And this one came according to the.
Actually, I'm going to correct you on that, Dr. Power. Yeah. What we have, I've just found from Jassi Nasser. You know who Dr. Jassi Nasser is?
Yes. Yep.
He has come out with a book where he has written, and he talks about the Asim Ibn Abi al-Najud, and he says between the time of Asim and the time of Ibn Mujahid, who then chose Hafs, and he also chose Shuba to be the two. There are 91 other qira'ats, 91 other, just from that one family, just from the family of Asim. So you're talking about Asim, who was dated from 745 up to Ibn Mujahid, who's 936. So you're talking basically only 200 years. Within that 200-year period, 91 other qira'ats came from Asim's, you might say, from his recitation. These were transmitters that came after him.
Yeah, I'd heard of 50. So we had a friend here, a Saudi friend, who was doing some research on the Quran, and he said he had identified 50 that he knew of. But yeah, so there's maybe more out there than have been commonly understood. Let's have a look at this process. So it comes from Muhammad to these 4 men. So Ubay, Uthman, Zayd, and Ali, and these are quite well-known men in Islamic history, and they were all companions of the Prophet. Some were his relatives, and he passed the Quran on to them. But it's not actually clear how he did that, whether they were all together and they received just the one version, or did they all hear it from him separately? So that's why I've got the arrows or the box in there. But they then, according to the tradition, passed it on to this guy, Abu Abdurrahman al-Sulami. And he, again, we're not sure how he heard it from these 4. Did he hear it from them one at a time, or did he meet with the 4 of them together? How did he receive it? But then he passes it on to Asim, and he passes it on to Hafs. But he wasn't the only one. Shu'bah also received a version of the Quran from Asim, and I have that copy, and there are differences between those 2 copies. So either Asim spoke to them at 2 different times and gave them different versions of the Quran, or they both heard him and they wrote down different versions of the Quran, because the 2 that they have are different. And we'll talk about some of those differences when we compare it with the Warsh version. Here's the Yep, is that good? Here's the transmission line from Muhammad to Warsh, and you can see this one's a lot more complicated. So it goes from Muhammad just to this one man, Ubay bin Ka'b. We saw him in Damascus before. His version had 115 chapters. And then he passed it on to Abu Huraira and Ibn Abbas and Abdullah bin Ayyash. Abu Huraira and Ibn Abbas were quite well-known people who connected with Muhammad a lot. And then we're not sure how Ubay got it, or how they got it from Ubay, whether all together or separately. But then they passed it on to 5 men, and you can see them: Abu Ja'far, Abu Dawood, Ibn Nasa, Abdullah Muslim, and Abu Ruh. And again, how this conveyance happened, we're not sure. How the transmission took place. but at some stage, according to the tradition, they passed it on to Nafi, and he passed it on to Warish, but he also passed it on to Qalun. And again, there are differences between those two texts. So we have this same problem of why was one transmitter able to generate two texts from his hearers? Was it
okay? May I stop you there again, Dr. Power? Jafi Nasser asked, when you look at Nafi is generation number 4, right?
Yeah.
4th generation, and his date is 785. Between Nafi and Ibn Mujahid, there are 63 other qira'ats, of which Warsh and Qalun were chosen. So there was 61 of them that were not chosen. 61 that we could go to that were not chosen. We only know of Warsh and Qalun. That's what you have in your collection. But let me ask another question. Look at generation 1, 2, and 3. Do we have any of those generations today? 1, 2, or 3?
Nothing. Yeah.
Okay, so this is all nothing more than oral tradition is what we're talking about.
It is, yeah. And
it's all based on oral tradition. And where was that oral tradition written down?
Yeah, not until the 700s, the late 700s. Yeah, because we do have some. Yeah.
Where do we find the oral tradition for all of these different generation 1, generation 2, generation 3? Who is it that actually gives us? Where do we go to find out about these generations? It's people like Al-Bukhari. It's people like Sahih Muslim. It's people like Al-Tabari. When were they writing? They were writing in 870, 875, 923. That's 9th and 10th century. So these people who are writing about the generation 1, 2, and 3 are all writing 240 years to 300 years after the fact. Am I correct?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Does that not sound suspicious to you?
Yeah, so we don't actually have any records from these particular periods of these people saying, I told so-and-so. All we have is someone writing 200 years later saying, this person told that person. So that it's not based on eyewitness or even contemporaneous accounts.
In fact, there's no manuscripts for any of Ubay ibn Ka'b or Abu Huraira or Ibn Abbas or Abu Jafar, Abu Dawud, and none of these. We don't have any manuscripts for any of these writers. We only begin to have manuscripts from the 4th generation.
Yes.
And that's why you're able to buy them today. You can't buy any of the 3rd, 2nd, or 1st generation, to say nothing of the time from Muhammad or even Uthman. There is nothing that you can buy or get on the market today for any of those. It's all what we've been told from the 9th and 10th century, redacting back to the 7th century. Am I correct on that?
Exactly, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, I just so our hearers are listening to this, because almost everything that we're talking about today is what the 9th and 10th century Islamic traditions tell us about the 7th and 8th century. We really don't find out anything about any qira'at or any real Qurans and how the different derivations until really the 8th century, and really not until 736. They all come after 736. Muhammad died in 632. Just so people realize, and you did say that a little earlier, it takes 100 years for these finally to get written down.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks a lot.
So why do we have these significant differences? And I'll go through some of those before. We have the problem with the Arabic alphabet. You can see here the dots that are there on 22 out of the 28 letters have got, 22 out of the 28 letters can't be distinguished without the dots, otherwise they're the same. If we look at that top line there, you can see it's got an A, it's got 3 little kind of shapes, and then 3 little hooks. Without the dots, that just looks like there's 3 letters, but there's actually 7 letters there. The same with all of the others. You have only 7 unambiguous letters amongst the 28 letters there, and so you can have one word without the dots that's called the rasm, or the basic skeleton, and then when you put the dots in, then you'll come up with multiple meanings. You can put dots above or below 1, 2, or 3 depending on the letter, and you get variant readings. So you get down sorry, I'll just skip that one, go to this one. Yeah, okay. Variant readings. So you can see in the bottom of the left-hand column, the word she built is bannat, and the word for she destroyed is tabbat. Without the dots, you can't tell whether she destroyed the city or she built the city. It's completely ambiguous. And you can see a whole lot of others there. He could plant a tree, or he could deflower a tree. Yeah, so he could prove a thing, or a point, or he could repent of a point. The meanings will change depending on where you put the dots. So that becomes a problem, and that's the variations that we see within these texts. The two I'm going to look at today are called the Hafs and the Warsh riwayats. These are the two most popular ones. The Hafs one is very popular throughout the whole of the Middle East, and most around the world. The version that they'll say, this is the Quran, the Arabic Quran is the Hafs version. The Warsh version is popular in North Africa. So if you go to Morocco or Algeria, Tunisia, they like this version. It was one of those ones on that far right-hand side of those columns that had been passed on, and they came through different routes. And when we look at them, we see over 120.
Can I just stop there, Bernie?
Yep, sure.
Bernie, again, the Hafs and the Warsh are not part of the 10 original ones. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah.
So and I don't remember when our good friend Dr. Yasser Qadi talked about the 10. He says, this is the creme de la creme. This is the best of the best. So the creme de la creme, the best of the best, these 10. And remember, Dr. Shabanati said, we have to go to these 10. These are the 10 that are the standard for everything else. These are the foundation for all the others. And yet these two names, Hafs and Warsh, are not amongst those 10. What does that say to you?
Yeah, so it's a problem in that these are redacted texts from the people that they heard them from, and we know that because the other people who heard the same text have got different versions of them. So this is a bit of a problem, and we'll talk about that later, how they've sought to resolve that. But as you go through them, there's over 120 consonantal or long vowel or symbol differences which affect the meanings of words. Now, Shabir Ali and others will say, oh, but we don't have any change in doctrine. But that's not the point. What Muslims have been arguing for, 14 centuries is the Quran has never been changed. Not a single thing has been changed. But in fact, we're finding that that's not true. And when we look at these different texts, we find that the meanings have been changed. There's also over 5,000 short vowel or diacritical marks. Now, this is only comparing two of those 20 plus versions that I showed you on the right-hand side of that. I found a website which only found 51 variations. I think he was being a little bit generous. I'll go through the ones that I've discovered. This is a little bit forensic, so I'll rip through it reasonably quickly and then get to something more interesting at the end. There's some of the differences have letters or symbols that are missing from the Hafs version, but you found in the Warsh version. Some have got symbols or letters in the Hafs version that are missing from the included or missing, and some have got the same number of letters, but they are different ones. So at some stage, a scribe has put down something. They've either included a letter or left a letter out or changed a letter. So those are the three options of those differences in the numbers of letters. Mm-hmm. And then you can also see changes in meaning, and you can see sometimes a noun gets changed to a different noun. Nouns get changed from singular to plural. A noun being changed from a noun to a particle or a preposition or a verb. A verb gets changed to a different verb. A verb changes from active to passive. And I'll go through all of these and just give you the examples from the passage. I think I haven't come across anyone who's actually gone right through the Quran and looked at all of these differences. So I'm going to do that with you today. So here we have examples of changes in the meanings of nouns. So you've got the Hafs version there in the left-hand column, the Warsh version on the right-hand, and you can see even if you can't read the Arabic, you can see that there are different symbols. This one here has got a dagger aleph, this one lacks it. So this changes the word from an owner, Malik, to a king, Malik. This one, bird, is tayran, and this one is ta'iran, means flying. This is the one that's particularly important. The word for good tidings is bushra, and the word for proclamation is nushra. So this one, because it's got the dot down below, is the B. This one, because it's got the dot above, is the N. And they're different words. They don't have the same meaning. every proclamation is good news, is not good news, and all good news is not necessarily proclaimed. Here's another one where you get the verbs changing from singular to plural, and here's the references. These are all taken from the Huss version, and you can see there's the English versions there. Notice it's not consistent. Sometimes the plural is on this side, and other times the plural is on the other side. So it's not as though one of them saying all these words are plural and the other one saying they're all singular, but there's a mixture. I'll highlight the one at the top there. This one, this is about if you cannot fast, it says you can pay a ransom, and the word there is fidya, to and then fill in the gap, a poor person, miskinin, or poor people, masakin. Now, this has got important legal implications. For example, if in the month of Ramadan you can't fast for some reason, you can actually pay for someone else to eat. So it could be one person or it could be multiple person. But if you're wanting to make sure that you get the benefit from your gift, you should know who you should give it to or how many people you should give it to. The versions of the Quran aren't clear on that, and it needs the hadith for Muhammad to come out with a
would this be could this be a doctrinal difference? Could this be a difference in practice? Right there would be something that Shabir Ali needs to look at, because depending on which one you go with, the Hafs or the Warsh, it would change the doctrine. It would also change the practice.
And also, like the four schools, you've got the Hanafi, Hanbali, Shafi, and Maliki. They are aware of these differences, and sometimes they will give different rulings based on the different readings. So it really has legal implications.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you.
Here's another one, changing from a noun to a preposition or a verb. And you can see two examples here. He made is ja'ala, and the maker is ja'ilu. So it goes from a noun to from a verb to a noun. But this one at the bottom here is about the slaves, ibadun, or the word aindun. Again, you've got the different here. This one that's got the dot below, which makes it a B. This one's got the dot above, which makes it a noon, an end. And it says these angels are either they're the slaves of Allah, they're either ibadu Allah, or they're ibadu Rahman or Aind Rahman. So it's talking about the position of the angels and whether they talking in the context of them being made or seen as female.
Dr. Shabir Ali came back on that one. If you could go back to that one, 43:19, and he responded. He says, "Listen, this is not a change in meaning. Slaves are with Allah, and wouldn't you want to be angels? The angels are with Allah, and they are both slaves and with Allah simultaneously. So where's the problem here?"
Yeah. So the problem is that the text has been changed. So at some stage, someone has got in there and put the dot in the wrong place, or moved it and put it somewhere else.
So the fact is that somebody could actually change God's words, what you're saying. And we have reference after reference in the Quran, chapter 10, verse 15, chapter 15, verse 9, chapter 18, verse 27, which says that God, Allah, preserves his word. He guards his word from any corruption. So here you're seeing an example of corruption. Almost every one of these is examples of corruption. The fact that there are so many thousands, we're up to now 93,236 of these corruptions, shows that it's not very good guarding, is it?
No, not at all. Yeah. It's very much, and as I said right from the very beginning, it was a contested text, and it still remains so. Changing to different verbs, and you can see here the first one there, number two, did they lie or did they disbelieve? Again, difference in meaning between those two. Did they actually actively misrepresent something, or did they disbelieve it in their hearts and not necessarily take any action? So difference in meaning. The last one, number 5, he fought is qatala, means he fought against somebody, and qutila, he was killed. So it says many a prophet fought or many a prophet was killed. So the meaning is quite different there. Changing a verb from active to passive, highlighting number 3, that is yudhalla, yudhallu, someone being led astray, or yudhillu yadillu is he leads astray. So we're talking about someone who is a perpetrator of injustice in leading others astray, or someone who is a victim of injustice being led astray. So the significant the change.
One does the action, one receives the action. So
Yes,
that would have a completely different meaning, as you're saying.
Mm-hmm. So what happens is they then change all the nouns around so it fits in. The noun that was the subject then becomes the object of this. So it has implications. Here's another one. The very top line there, you can see this one here is we will forgive is naghfir, and the Warsh version says it will be forgiven, yughfar. But in the Hisham version, they actually come up with a third option, which is tughfar. So you've got three different versions of this same word, because without the dots, it could be any one of those three. So they're all equally plausible suggestions that could go into the text. So it's not as though it's unambiguous in any way.
Okay.
This one, changing verbs from first person singular to third person singular. So the one that's highlighted there, he saved us, is anjana, and the Warsh version says you saved us. It says anjaytana, and the Hafs version there has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 letters in it. The Warsh version has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 letters in it. So they've actually infixed an extra couple of letters to kind of fit in what they thought made sense in that version of the Quran. Changing verbs from first person plural, we, to first person, second person, or third person singular. So this is basically changing from we's to you's. In the Quran, about 25% of the time that Allah speaks about himself, he calls himself we. And in these texts, that changes from he and I. You can see here number 2, instead of Allah saying I gave you, in the Hafs version he says we gave you. So this pluralization of the verbs in the text. You can also see that it's not consistent. So sometimes you've got about equal number of times Warsh uses the we construction and Hafs uses the we construction, and they switch over. Sometimes here it goes he punishes to we punish, and another one we punish to he punishes. The switches are being made. There's no consistency. Yeah.
So these are all referring to God in both cases.
These are all referring. Yeah. Always. Yeah. So sometimes Allah is he, sometimes I, sometimes we, sometimes you. Mm-hmm. This one, this changes from you to they, and you can see, and the difference is just simply putting your dots in a different place. So you've got here yaqulun, and this one taqulun, and again they switch over from one side to the other. It's not as though Hafs always uses this construction and Warsh always uses that one. They sometimes switch over from one to another. And this one here, changing from masculine to feminine, which is quite significant when you think about it grammatically, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes' time. And the last one, changing a statement to a command. You might know the verses in the Quran, there's over 332 of them, where Muhammad is told, qul, which is say, but sometimes it's changed to he said. So it changes from an action in the past that has been completed to an action in the future or the present which needs to be completed. So from a command in the past command in the present to a statement in the past. And the last one, where there's actually no change of meaning in the word. So you've got a word and it's kind of a synonym of it, but sometimes these synonyms actually do have a difference. So you've got here the word nabi, and this one here is nabi. This one's got a hamza in it, and you can see down the bottom sometimes putting a hamza in actually changes the meaning of a word. So it's again significant, although it's not significant in this particular case. So sometimes the English translations switch over from one side to another. So as I read through the Arabic and then I'll read the English, and I say he's not actually translating the Arabic. He's taking the Arabic that is in the Warsh version and translating the English of that. Warsh does the same thing. So it's and that's the problem of the translators, not of the text. But they read it through and they think, oh, this doesn't read well, so I'll just take the Arabic text from that one and translate that, even though that's not in the text that's on the column beside them. We see some instances.
No, can I just stop you, Bernie? Have you noticed that you've noticed that the English translators tend to use only the hafs and the warsh? Have you noticed any of these translators that use others like Ra or Kulun or Al-Duri or any of the others?
No, I haven't. I haven't come across those. The only versions of those ones I've been able to get have been Arabic only.
Okay, and they're always from Warsh or Hafs, the ones that you've come across?
Yes,
okay.
Yes, yeah. Sometimes there's grammatical corrections. I teach Arabic grammar at my college, and one of the things I give my students a text of the Quran and say, there's a grammatical error in that, can you find it? And they'll go through, and in these ones we've got a couple of cases here where you get a masculine verb with a feminine noun, and you should always have correspondence of gender between those. And in one version, it could be the wrong, but in the other version, it's been corrected. And we find that as we go through all of the different qira'ats, we often find that they're correcting the mistakes that were in the other ones. So I've found over about 100 grammatical errors in the Hafs version of the Quran in the Arabic text.
100 grammatical mistakes in the Hafs version.
Yes, yep. So they're not following the rules, and sometimes these rules are followed in other places there, but not in that particular instance. So again, there was a lot of flexibility in the way that they presented the Arabic. It's not the kind of perfectly consistent Arabic that we would expect to find there.
Wow. So this. I mean, we're at the very end. I would like to ask you some questions about Hafs, but that's fascinating that already you have found, because grammatical rules suggest human manipulation right through. Allah would not make this mistake. But let's get back to that. We'll come back about what you're doing here.
So those ones that I've just showed you are the 128 consonantal or long vowel differences which will affect the meaning. But as you go through compare the two Qurans, initially I started off, I thought I'll mark every difference that there. After 2 pages I gave up. And you can see these are some of the differences. You get hamzas. This is that little hook kind of shape here. Where are we? Here, that's being omitted. The hamzat al-wasl, a symbol at the beginning of a word, a different shape, the alaf maksura, and a whole lot of different things. There's so many of them that I just gave up. I was finding this is the first. Whoops, it should be. Oh, I haven't done that. So these are just 10 that I picked out at random, but I'd started right from the very beginning. I was finding an average of one short vowel or symbol difference every verse. So I was on the conservative side and saying it's about 5,000 because there's 6,000.
There are 6,300 verses in the Quran. So you're being conservative by saying 5,000 differences.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, and they're there. And again, I'll talk a little bit about how often this is. But you can find them in every single one of the versions that I've got. So this is a comparison between the Hafs and the Warsh version, the one that I just went through. You can see the 2 dots above or 2 dots below. This is the Aduri version. I got this one in Sudan when I was teaching there. You can see the word kabirun that's circled, and this one's kathirun. Kabir means big, kathir means a lot. The Ruh version, the word is yuqbalu, to be accepted, and it's actually grammatically incorrect, but the Ruh version corrects it and puts in the proper one. So it's a feminine verb, which it should be because it's referring to a feminine noun for intercessor. The Asusi version, changing from he will expiate to we will expiate. Again, the dots are in a different place, 2 dots below as opposed to 1 dot above. The Al-Bazzi version, many a prophet fought alongside and is qatala, and this many a prophet was killed, qutila. But Muslims have actually been talking about this for a very long time. In the 10th century, a guy called An-Nadim wrote the Fihris, which means an index, and he listed 7 books that had been written prior to that about the discrepancies of the Quranic manuscripts. We don't have any of these books, but he was writing about them. And these were well-known scholars, so people like El-Kisai and Khalaf and El-Farah, Abu Dawud el-Sijistani. These were the top scholars of their days writing about this and recognizing that there were discrepancies in the manuscripts of the Quran. Muslims have made lots of attempts to ensure only one Quran. There's been only one Quran. So we saw in 650, thereabouts, Uthman ordered all the variants to be burned. And in 1924, when the Egyptian government decided that the Hafs version was the version, so hence the 1924 Cairo version, they actually dropped all the variants in the Nile. So they want to get rid of these. They don't want people to know about them. So just for a little bit of fun to finish off, the challenge. The Hafs version has reigned supreme for over 100 years. People are now looking for something new. What else is there? There's a lot of possible ingredients you could go through. There's many manuscripts. There's many different versions. I've talked about the 23, 25 that I've got there. How are you going to decide which one is the correct one? What's the best way to go forward? Well, we're going to have the Quran Chef Challenge. So we have here on the left Dr. Yasir Qadi, in the middle Dr. Shabir Ali, and on the right we have Adnan Rashid. And they've been asked to come up with the best recipe of the Quran. What is the one that they're going to go for? Given those are the ingredients, you've got the manuscripts, you've got the qira'at, the riwayat, what are you going to do? Well, Dr. Shabir Ali says, I'm sticking with Hafs, and he gets eliminated in the first round. He's out because he's not doing anything different. We need something a little bit more creative than that. Dr. Yasir Qadi says, well, I'm going for a mixture. He says, we've got many different ones, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to chop them up and I'm going to put them together into one, and I'm going to make a fruit salad. So all of the different bits in there it won't look like any of the ones that we've got there today, but it will be new and it will be different, and it will at least be true to the original. Adnan Rashid says, well, I'm a fundamentalist. I'm going back to the basics. He's going to not try and do anything fancy. He just says, let's go for the Quran with no dots and no vowels. So the recipe he comes up with is just fruit skins. He says, we're not going to have any flesh or any pulp. We'll just go for the bare bones, and that will be the one which I would put forward. So this is the kind of conflict that the Muslims have found themselves in at the moment. They're not quite sure what to do. We've got the materials. How are we going to put it together in a way that makes sense? And they're coming up with quite different responses and different outcomes.